our virtual Mem computing machine can solve in minutes, like in some cases for the scheduling problems and shipping problems we've done, it takes us about an hour to do a 30-day schedule versus years and years and years. That's with the virtual Mem computing.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
And you've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
So we're here today with John Beane. John Beane or Beale?
Beane.
Beane. Man, my handwriting is beautiful. John Beane, MEM Computing, correct?
Mem Computing, yep.
Mem Computing. And I try not to do too much research, but I am a nerd at heart or a geek at heart. And I've done a little bit of research on, what you're currently doing. But before we get into that, would you mind telling the audience just who you are, where you're from, and a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done 7 startups. I've co-founded 3 of them. The combined exits on those have delivered about $1.5 billion to investors. And I'm just a startup junkie and love going at it.
Right. Okay. So I love the concept of startup junkie, and I've been close to the startup world my almost my entire adult livelihood, right? Running a hosting company, always dealing with startups, and my shareholders are wildly entrepreneurial, and have some different cultivation capital fund and things like that. So the startup world is something that I am also passionate about. Not something I want to jump into too willy-nilly any longer as I'm getting a little older, but because the time commitments are extreme in the startup world, right? So, starting to elevate towards away from that a little bit. But can you tell us a little bit about what it is about the startup culture, the startup world that just, makes you that get your motor running?
I don't know. I think I have a mental deficiency or something, but there are people who are risk takers with, jumping out of planes and what have you. For some reason, I'm really attracted to the risk of building companies. I'm attracted to the fact that the people that you work with are all in it to win it, so to speak. Everybody's working hard. You're all going to the same goal. I've worked in larger organizations and just found that some people were there, for the paycheck, which is fine. And and lucky for them, they've got a lot more stuff to do outside of work. I just seem to be a bit of a workaholic. And part of it is I find these situations where something is considered impossible. And I just have a problem with that. Impossible
with the word impossible.
Yeah, problem and can't are 2 words that I can't really deal with. You just make me want to do it if you tell me it can't be done or it's impossible.
Right. So I have some of the startup mentality in me, and for me it's I see a problem and I want to solve it. Right. I'm just like, oh, can I do this? And for me, that's really all I care about is, can I make a script to make this problem go away? So I've got these scripts and programs and stuff laying all over my life that are just kind of, they work and they do these things and I never get them to market. I'm assuming you have some of the same quirks in your life where you're just trying to solve these problems and you do them at massive scale, but you don't ever take them to market. When do you know, when's for the guys out there like me and you've exited now some big numbers with 7 companies, right? So I think the folks will get that a little bit on your numbers. But I think there's a lot of people out there, men and women, that like to solve problems. They do it, and then they set it to the side. How do you know when one's like the gem that, hey, this is the one I'm going to take to market?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure. It just seems like if it feels like it's a new idea, and virtually every single startup I've done has been a startup where the product didn't exist, the market didn't exist, but the need existed, and it was recognized. And my teams and my co-founders all recognize that. So it's I used to describe it. This is going to date me with commercials, but I used to describe it as the V8 moment. I don't know if you remember. I don't know when these were, maybe even the 70s or 80s, where it's like somebody drinks a soda and then all of a sudden they see somebody drinking a V8. It's like, wow, I could have had a V8. That's what these things are. If you look at some of these problems and you say, I should have thought of that.
Right.
That's been an issue and never thought of how to solve that. And that's sort of what I think attracts me to startups and problem solving.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Mem Computing is a mixture of hardware, software, logistics, it solves a lot of problems with one set of products. Is that correct?
So Mem Computing is really confusing because what Mem Computing really is a new computer architecture, so a new circuit architecture. What's unique about Mem Computing is that when we develop a circuit, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, the emulation of that circuit, or what we call virtualization, so a virtual Mem Computing machine, is already faster than current best-in-class technologies. So this is basically, we're a semiconductor company. However, our semiconductors, unlike any semiconductor you've ever seen before, in emulation mode, so as a virtual solution, still just in software where you're emulating it to see how it works, we can actually use it in production and commercially, and also we're using with the DoD. Ultimately, we'll be developing real hardware, real chips. But the circuit that we design and work on from a virtual, the solutions that we provide are the circuit, and it's essentially the schematics that we then can take to the next level. So the current product that's been out since 2019 is our virtual Mem Computing machine. It's designed to solve optimization problems, hard optimization problems like routing and scheduling that actually are intractable for current computers. They're not impossible. Intractable means it would take years to solve. So it's infeasible. Well, not infeasible, but anyway.
Right.
So people solve them today, but they solve them with approximations. Like your UPS driver has the best route they possibly can have based on current technology, but it's not optimal. And it's been shown, and UPS actually has the marketing on this, that if they could save 1 mile per truck per day for a year in North America, they'd save $50 million. And our technology can deliver more than 1 mile savings. So
and the environmental impact is huge.
Yeah, it comes along with it, right? You by improving that, we've done a lot of work for oil and gas companies where we've helped them optimize fleets of ships, fleets of helicopters, things like that, where it helps them save money because the number of ships and helicopters and things they need, you get to reduce it by 40% or more. You also reduce the number of trips they take because it's more optimal. And the reduction in the number of trips, it provides this automatic greenhouse gas removal because you're not running ships across the ocean or what have you. Right. So it's kind of a freebie that comes along with the performance and cost savings that you get too.
Right. All right. So I'm going to back up a little bit and try to simplify this for myself and for the audience. You said virtual semiconductor. Is that accurate?
Sure. Yep.
All right. So with that, today, can you describe to the audience today what a semiconductor kind of is?
Sure.
At a high level, like a 10,000-foot view.
Yeah, well, so our computers and our cell phones and everything are made up of chips, silicon-based chips. Those chips are semiconductors, or the terminology implies that. So, but when you build a chip, you always build it first in software. You emulate it in software, you build it using CAD programs and what have you. And you build that circuit, and you do that first in software because you want to make sure you find any bugs before you start paying the big money to build it in chips. Because when you get something, send it to the foundry and bring it back, you're spending hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And if you get it back from the fab and it doesn't work, well, that was a lot of wasted money. So you try to simulate it and everything to try and get out all the problems and save costs from doing that. So, but what we found with Mem Computing, and this has never been done before, and in fact, the San Diego Supercomputer Center was the ones who evaluated our technology and actually discovered this, is that in some cases, just the software emulation where you're just figuring out your chip, you can apply that to current problems and provide a better solution than what they can get today.
Okay. And so just to even dumb it down further for the audience, the circuit is just a series of on and offs or ones and zeros, right? Is that correct?
Well, the circuit, sorry, I can't help myself probably. A circuit is made up of logic gates. Logic gates essentially are ones and zeros. And we have a special patented style of logic gate that gives us the ability to do this. So yeah, a circuit is ones and zeros. In real life, a silicon-based circuit, it's not ones and zeros. It's a volt,
on or off.
Yeah, a power voltage or a short, not a short, but no voltage. Right. And when you emulate it, you're basically doing ones and zeros. Yeah.
Right. So, and then the ones and zeros are basically they're the how to solve the math problems, right? The formulas for solving different problems are what's all of these. And what you're saying is that you've created, even in a virtual world, a faster way to solve problems.
Exactly. So let me give you an example. I talked about these intractable problems, or take them years to solve it today.
Right.
So a problem that could take years today to get an optimal solution, they already take maybe days or weeks to get an approximate solution. Our virtual Mem computing machine can solve in minutes, like in some cases for the scheduling problems and shipping problems we've done, it takes us about an hour to do a 30-day schedule versus years and years and years. That's with the virtual Mem computing. When we build the chip to do that, the difference is the chip will be real time. It would be microseconds. Right. So, but if I can solve a problem in an hour today that couldn't be solved in years, that's a huge benefit, and that's what we've released first, because it's a lot easier to release the virtual solution before we really spend the money and build chips.
Right. I think it's so. At the end of the day, a faster computer to the people out there, but for the people doing big logistics, cancer research, big logistics, things like that, this is really, really important stuff, right? Is it
sorry.
Is it also like stuff like processing video and things like that of that nature?
So one of the chips that we are currently trying to get funded is one we call the Mem GPU. So it'll be for processing images. The use case that we designed it after was essentially processing images on a satellite, but and satellites have very low power today, performance, and they also have low power, in that they have only so much battery life. They do have solar cells that refill it, but it's still, you can only use so much in a 24-hour period. So our solution is ultra high performance. It's essentially the simulation of that design implies that it's thousands of times faster than, or at least 1,000 times faster than the current best-in-class NVIDIA GPU, and uses about 1/1000th of the energy. So GPUs are really powerful, but they use a ton of energy. You can't really outfit satellites with many of those, and so that's one of the issues with anyway. But this same chip could ultimately go into your and my smartphone, because we all have image processing chips in our GPUs in our smartphones.
Right. Okay. And just, I'm going to try to bring this all the way around for the audience so they understand kind of what the impact of what seems like, oh, it's just a faster computer kind of implicates long term. You can remember back, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, a home computer was huge, right? Now it's in the palm of our hands. Universities had, NASA's, single processing units took up entire rooms, right? Now with the multiprocessor, websites like Facebook.com take up, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of square feet of data center space burning, thousands of kilowatts of megawatts of power every single second, right? So if we can turn these out faster with less electricity, right? Because when you're on Facebook, it's costing somebody electricity when you're on Facebook, and that's why they're showing you the ads. That reduces the world's carbon footprint. It makes things faster, it makes things better, reduces fraud, right? Because I'm sure that your technology, do you have a blockchain play with your tech at all?
What's that?
A blockchain?
Oh, blockchain. Potentially. We haven't explored it in detail yet, but yeah, potentially, yes.
Right. As the world moves to smart contracts and paperless contracts and blockchain technology, these kinds of movements forward in our data processing power are wildly important, right? And I mean, the multiprocessor, right? We've been dealing with the same multiprocessor architecture now, just building a better mousetrap for 20 years?
80 years. 80.
80?
Our computers today use the same architecture that was developed in the 40s and 50s, developed originally in the 40s by Alan Turing. All our computers, including supercomputers, are considered Turing machines. So, and the key thing to Mem Computing is this. So it was developed by two PhD physicists who went back to the drawing board and said, knowing what we know today, instead of just making the same thing faster, how would we design the circuitry of a computer today? And so they thought totally outside the box and created this new computer architecture. In the science world, it's considered a non-Turing, non-von Neumann architecture, which our current computers are all von Neumann architecture based Turing machines. So probably a little more detail in words that didn't need to throw out.
Yeah, we're probably way off topic for what this show is about, because we lean more on business, but I love tech. And so are you saying, and I can recall this because I owned a little computer store in 1996, 97, before I went into the web hosting world. The jump from, and this is going back, folks, so this is probably way too technical if you're not a technical person. The jump from the 486 to the P75, that wasn't a significant architecture change. That was just the same stuff, smaller and more put on the board.
Exactly. What Moore's law has essentially said is that, and the reason why computers have been growing, but essentially they've plateaued now, they kind of reached the end of Moore's law, is that the number of transistors on a chip would double every year to 2 years. And that gave you
and
more.
The price would half.
And in most cases it did. However, and you used to feel it, right? When you bought a new computer every 2 or 3 years, that new computer was insanely fast compared to you. Now, when you buy new computers,
it was just on the internet.
Yeah.
I could just go to it was on the internet. Like, that was so cool.
Yeah. And now, though, you refresh your computer and it's not going to be much faster than the last one you had. They just
even in our world, I used to say a computer had a 3 to 5 year life expectancy on the high side. And now, I mean, I know that I'm running computers that are 10 and 15 years old, doing pretty significant workloads, right? That are just chugging along. If you maintain it properly and it serves your need, the hardware still works until they stop making drivers for it. And if you know how to make your own drivers, well, you can make stuff work for a very, very long time, right?
Exactly.
So, it's a crazy world. Now, with Mem Computing, do you think Moore's law is going to fit into a new type of architecture as well?
Well,
where we'll see double the growth and half the costs?
Yeah, with essentially, one of the things that makes Mem Computing possible is the fact that Moore's law existed, and people created these transistors that made them smaller and smaller so you could put more and more on a chip.
Right.
10 years ago, maybe Mem Computing we couldn't build circuits that could go on a chip because the number of transistors supported. But now we can take advantage of the state of the art, because we don't require, and we won't affect the number of transistors that can fit on a silicon chip, but we will take advantage of that. And so Moore's law does they're still trying to make smaller and smaller lines and stuff, but they're getting down to the point where they're getting into atoms, and the electrons can't go down the line and
Right.
stuff. So anyway, but it'll really be a jump from a just groundbreaking jump in the performance that you can get out of a computer. In the beginning, it's going to be for specific problem cases, but ultimately it's going to grow. And people consider quantum computing. They think that's going to be the next generation, but that doesn't really work yet. It's still in its infancy, and it's at least 10 years away. But so the performance people are expecting.
Well, it's still the size of a room, right?
Well, it is the issue. So they can make small chips ultimately, but the issue with quantum computing is it has to be in the computer has to be in a vacuum that's stronger than space and run at near absolute zero. So it will be in a large, controlled area where the computer could be small, but it won't matter because you got to create that environment.
Right. That is wild. So, okay, moving along. You've got a much faster processing unit now. You can process data much, much faster. We are entering this world of Internet 3.0, which, to different people might mean a bunch of different stuff. To me, it's just the next evolution of the internet, right? It's taking the stuff that we knew 10 years ago and really productizing it today. Voice automation, the blockchain technology with NFTs and smart contracts, face recognition, all of those kinds of things that have been around for a long time, but the processing power just wasn't there. The internet wasn't there to really support it. Are you thinking that Mem Computing is going to have a significant play in, and I don't like the phrase artificial intelligence that much. I like augmented intelligence a little bit better, in artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Yeah, so those cover a wide area, right?
Yes.
And so, but absolutely, Mem Computing will definitely contribute to and improve the computations associated with AI and machine learning, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, we actually, not to get too far afield, but we actually have designs for a neural network on a chip. You don't have a general purpose neural network on chips today, but we'll ultimately be able to design that and give you a real-time neural network, which will be another insane capability.
Yeah, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around what the neural networks look like, right?
Yeah.
It's just, if this chip has this set of equations that it knows and this chip knows, and they can kind of share that knowledge in real time is kind of how I simplify it in my head.
Sure.
But I think it's more complicated than that in reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when my technologist hat gets hung up, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave this to smarter boys than me, because I get I think at some point I get lost in spirituality when I talk about technology too deep, and then I'm like, whoa, this got too weird for me, so I just back off and move on. All right.
Yeah,
so,
I know the feeling. We deal with that every day. Our science is too deep.
It is amazing how, when you really start correlating the human brain and human activity to computers and the internet and how we interact with each other, and it's really, the internet to me is its own social network, right? In the beginning, right? I go back to ICQ and Merck, right? Were my games of choice, tools of choice back then. And when you really think about it, it's just people and computers all over the world that are interacting with each other in some way. and helping each other gain knowledge from each other. So it's really, really interesting to think about and go deep into. But
And it's a great delivery mechanism for porn. I mean, come on.
I tell some kids today, if it wasn't for adult content, the internet would not be where it is today. And they're kind of dumbfounded that, the first money that was made on the internet was adult content, right? And I actually, there's a movie called Middlemen, and that I make a lot of my new employees like, you should just watch this movie. It's cheesy and it's a little offensive, but this kind of lays the groundwork for the first credit card transactions on the internet, right? And that's a true story that happened. And so it's a good, I guess, mockumentary piece that is just fun to watch. But now you've had 7 successful exits on startups. So, and just for the folks out there that are thinking about starting a company or doing something, was that 7 at-bats and 7 home runs, or were there a lot more at-bats for you than the 7 startups that you had successful exits on?
So officially, I've had 6 exits because one of my companies is still private, so it hasn't exited yet. But so there were 2 absolute grand slam, 1 grand slam, 1 home run, and every one of the startups I've been involved in has been acquired, and none of them have been a dot bomb or anything like that. They all did well. Not all of them returned significant amounts of money to the investors. However, virtually all of them have paid salaries for a number of people for years. So they valid companies that hired people and kept the economy going, even though some of them did not make the investors any extra money. But the investors expect that, right? They invest in 10 companies and hope that one's a home run. And
correct.
I've been lucky with one that was a grand slam and one that was an absolute home run as well.
Okay, so you've had one that just didn't go well.
I've had a number, I would say 2 or 3, that were ultimately acquired by a larger company, but weren't necessarily acquired. It's not that they didn't go well, or I guess I struggle with that, maybe my ego. But they didn't fail. They continued. The technology was good. They got acquired by a larger company, but it's not like they went public on their own for hundreds of millions of dollars, or
it wasn't a liquidity moment for you.
Yeah, not a major one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you one example just to tell you. Probably the one that did the worst for investors. One of the companies I was involved with, called Bridge Medical, had raised over $100 million in venture money over the years. And when it was acquired for $25 million. So the investors
took a loss.
Yeah, they took a loss.
But all
the employees went to a new got a new paycheck with a new company, and some are still with those new companies, and others have moved on, done other startups themselves, or what have you.
Right. And so the people out there that are they're worried about not returning a significant return to their investors, right? That's a big concern. If you're running the kind of business where you're knocking on doors and saying, hey, you want to be part of this business, and I think it's under 50 privately held, or is it under 200 now that you can have on a privately held company, investors?
Oh, I don't know. I actually don't know that number. Yeah.
I think you can have under 200 private investors now. I'm not sure. Talk to your accountant or your lawyer before you take my word for it. But some new laws passed on unaccredited investors, so you can the friends and family rounds are a little bit deeper now than they used to be.
Yeah.
But the emphasis is on a return to your investor, right? And privately held companies don't have the same rules as publicly traded companies. But when you gave your investors a loss, that's a hard pill to swallow, right? Some of them had a vote in the matter, right? Like, yeah, let's go ahead and exit, or let's stay in here.
Absolutely. Yeah. The largest investors sit on the board, and they make the decision when sometimes it's time to get out.
Right. So But now you've got another idea, and you're back at bat, and you're knocking on an investor's door, and you're asking for money again, and you have it in the back of your head that, man, I didn't do the best return for my investors on this last rodeo. What do you have to do in your own mindset to overcome that and get back on that horse and really just march forward, knowing that the last rodeo wasn't the best one for you?
Yeah. So I've actually had investors and others tell me that one of the reasons why they like me is because I have arrows in my back, right? So you will learn more from your failures than your successes. The key thing, though, is every time you start a new startup, you better believe that this thing is going to be the next thing since sliced bread, and it's going to make everybody $1 billion, right?
Right.
Your optimism has to be there. You also have to be able to back it up by showing forecasting and other numbers that indicate how you can do that. So you need to be able to show that it's all conjecture and forecasting, but if you do it right and make it believable, then the investors will invest in you.
Right.
And if you have past wins, that's always a positive thing. That it's like, well, there's no guarantee you can do it again, but maybe you can.
Right. I have found in the investors that I know, and I know a handful, right? I think they all prefer somebody that's been through the trenches, that has, been in that really, highly adversity situation and didn't give up. They came in and they marched through it every day. And sometimes, at where you're at and where I'm at, that means I don't get paychecks. My staff does, but sometimes I got to say, hey guys, and your investors, they know that they see it in the books. If they don't see it, it's a bad investor. Appreciate the hell out of it, right?
Yeah.
And they'll put your money in it. So I think it's more. My opinion is it's more of who you are than what your idea or product is. If you're building something, you're going to investors. Is that you're saying?
I mean,
or do you got a different outlook?
Yeah, a lot of investors will tell you that the first thing they invest in is the team. And,
right.
And in fact, my last company, a company called EcoATM, I had an investor that I met after the fact who did not invest and told me I had a chance to invest. I didn't invest. I thought that it was, you guys would never be able to do it. He said, but obviously you had the team that could pull it off. And
right.
So the team is very important. But the idea has to be there as well.
Right.
Plenty of people have gotten money that had good teams and bad ideas.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it on the head. Absolutely. You have to darn well believe that you can return. And if you don't believe, if you have a slightest doubt in your head that you can't, they're going to smell that from miles away, that there's doubt in the water, and if you have doubt, what that's going to mean what the investor is going to think immediately, if he can sense any doubt, is this guy or lady, they're not going to have the tenacity to pull it through when times get tough. And they all know that times are going to get tough.
Oh yeah.
Right. We're, right now we're shooting this in May of 22, which is one of the biggest, recessions that I've seen in my lifetime right now with the inflation that we're going. And, a lot of businesses are shutting down right now. And the ones that make it through this will be the ones that get investors in 2026 and 2028 when this market turns around and really starts to flourish again. So my biggest advice to the audience is, if you're in a position that's really challenging, fight through it and try to figure out what the solution is. Sometimes it's an exit for a loss, but just closing the doors is never I don't think is ever the right solution. Just shutting down, right? You got to find out, liquidate the assets, do something to get the money back to, if you're your own investor or your investors, in some fashion. So
yeah. Fortunately, I've never had to do that. I hope that continues.
I've chose to do it a couple of times on smaller things. And when I chose to do it, it was kind of like, oh, I've got this better project running now, and this is not, it's a decent little moneymaker, but we're going to kick it to somebody else to run and let them do it as a, but It happens. I exited the mining business, crypto mining in 2016, which is one of my biggest mistakes of my life. Was just just shutting down all of my mining equipment too, because the market was flat for that time. But we move on. We live and learn. So
Yes, absolutely.
now you've had exits for big dollars,
Yeah.
right? 1.5 billion,
Yeah.
roughly.
If you add them all up. Yep.
Add them all up.
Yep.
Do you get to keep all that money?
Oh,
Where's
yeah.
that money go?
In my pocket.
Right in your pocket?
Oh. So
Yeah, I mean, people hear exit, they hear exits and they hear these giant dollar amounts, but what they forget is operating costs, expenses, debt, payback, all this other stuff. So,
well, it's not actually when you do an exit, the shareholders get their share of that exit, right? So,
right.
So the first startup I was involved with exited for $960 million, so almost $1 billion. Well,
That's a good
at that point, it was also a public company, and there were tens of thousands of investors. So there are some big investors, and all the employees were given stock, and all the employees made money out of it.
Right.
But it's not no one single person got that money, and
right.
It's like my daughter always asks me about my own company, and because I believe that we will ultimately exit for over $1 billion. And she's like, when you have $1 billion, can I have, $1 million in Robux money? Right? And it's like, I will not have $1 billion. The company will have made $1 billion, and the investors will split that based on what they own. And I'll do okay based on my shares, but I will not have $1 billion.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's funny, like the thought process of, they sold it for, $1 million or $1 billion or whatever it is. They're rich. And at the end of the day, wealthy maybe, but that 1.5 billion didn't go into one person's pocket by far. Right. Maybe a high-end investor might get a couple million out of something like that. Right. Or 10, 20 million. But
Yep.
So fantastic. All right. So keep moving on. You've got some big exits, crushing it. And yet you still keep going back to the till. And it's not easy, right?
Yeah, it's so the reason why I got involved with Mem Computing is after my last company exited, UC San Diego asked me to come on board as an entrepreneur in residence to evaluate their intellectual property. They get $1 billion a year in grants, and they create intellectual property left and right, but they don't know what to do with it. So I went there, and my goal was just to work with brilliant people at the university and help them do things. I had no desire to work like this again. But then I met these two inventors of the Mem Computing technology. They were in a situation where they needed some more money to build the prototype. Everything was in theory, science was built out. They had the documentation and the publications, but they didn't have the money now to build it. And so what I realized was that technology, this Mem Computing technology, was going to go on a shelf, because these guys are physicists. They live off of grants, and if they can't get a grant for Project X, they'll do a grant for Project Y. They're physicists. They can do anything.
Right.
So if that goes on a shelf, if Mem Computing goes on a shelf, who knows when they'll get back around to it, because they could have grants that keep them going for a while. And I just did this, it was the groundbreaking implications of this technology. I felt it needed to see the light of day. So we spun the company out. The science is way over my head, so I can't be a technical person in the company, but I've got all this background with startups, so I had the most business experience. So I was naturally, crazily became the CEO. But and I actually cursed those guys, and it's like, you bastards! I was working 10 hours a week, and now I got to go back to 80-hour weeks again. Thanks a lot for inventing this.
But the way that you talk about that, I think, is important for the audience too. If you're thinking about starting a business, and I have I've got a couple different businesses. And I have one that's an obligation to me, right? If you feel like more so than the desire to create something or do something or have your own job, if you literally feel like you have an obligation to bring this product or service to the world, I don't know how you can't be successful. Like if that's how you feel about your product or service, it's going to be hard. I think all business is hard, no matter what you're doing. Even if you love what you're doing and making a lot of money, or if it's still going to have hard moments that you have to deal with. So
yeah,
but that obligation, if you feel obligated that the rest of the world needs this, that wakes you up and brings you into that office or that building with a certain amount of passion that just can't be replicated any other way that I have found in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Right. So obligation, feeling an obligation to serve that community. I can't think of a better way to put it on a successful business.
Yeah. The way that I kind of describe that, and it's the way that all the people in this company work is that this company is not going to fail by the lack of me trying, right? So the company might fail, it's not going to fail because I didn't bust my butt,
right?
And that's what we all do, and that's why I like startups. Everybody busts their butt, and even if the startup fails, it hopefully you flamed out. I mean, the best thing to do is to give it all, and then if it's definitely going to fail, then flame out. Rather than, I had one CFO in one company that I wasn't a founder of that wanted to essentially decide, we had so much funding left and decided to just put out pennies instead. And I was like, no, let's burn it. Let's go out in 3 months trying. Well, we're only going to succeed if we try. So let's burn the money. And if we go out of business in 3 months, we go out of business in 3 months, the investors they won't love it, but they'll respect us for trying. But if you take a year, you're really just saying you want to be mediocre. And people don't do startups to be mediocre. You do startups to win. And so you might as well go out flaming or hope that it doesn't flame. And instead you hit that rocket and wildly succeed.
Absolutely. Kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. I totally agree. That's the fail fast mentality, right? Of if you're going to fail, let's figure out if we're going to fail fast or not fast. And sometimes that's hard to decide because sometimes you always feel like that, oh, one more day and I can crack this. I'm really, really close. But sometimes you're really, really close for a really, really long time, right? But it takes that one lever that moves somewhere in the future that opens up the floodgates for you.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So awesome. So you're back in it. You're back to the daily grind, 80 hours a week, crushing it. You've got customers for Mem Computing now?
Yeah, we have a number of customers in so Mem Computing, we're still a small company, basically working out of a garage, but our customers are the likes of Lockheed Martin, Chevron, the Space Force, the Department of the Air Force, a company called ArcelorMittal, which is the world's largest steel producer and mining company. And so it's just wild that as small as we are, our clients are humongous, Fortune 100 companies.
Now, they're using this technology in production today, or are they proof of concept still?
It's primarily proof of concept still. So the technology is such that it seems too good to be true when you hear about it. And so each new company, and it's starting to change, but each new company essentially says to us, okay, you say that you can leap a building in a single bound. Here's a building.
Right.
Show me what you can do. And then the goal is you show them what you can do, and then you bring it into production. And so we have a number of them where we have leapt buildings in a single bound. They're thrilled about it. And now, so the disadvantage of dealing with this companies of that size, the negotiation time frame to get to a commercial contract now to bring it into production. They aren't on the same timeline that we are. I mean,
No,
yeah,
not by the contracts are as tall as you are,
yeah.
and red lines and back and forth. And I remember doing a deal with a large coal manufacturer provider, and it took 2 years in contract back and forth, right? And it was miserable. It was.
Yeah.
I mean, the deal ended up being good, but it took 2 years.
You're not getting paid. You're not getting paid while you're negotiating that contract. That's the tough part.
No, not at all, right? And it takes a lot of time. The legal fees are extraordinary, right? If you bypass the legal fees, then you're possibly getting yourself into a heap of trouble, right?
Oh yeah.
So, all right. So for the folks out there, they've got a product. They've made this technology, and it's amazing. They have 0 customers. Are you the sales rep and the CEO, or did you bring on a sales team to get into the doors?
No, we're that small. I am sales.
Right.
Sales. I'm janitorial. I wash everybody's car so they can make sure they get their. I try to empower my team. The more roadblocks I can remove for them, the better they'll succeed, and the better they succeed, the better I've actually done my job.
Right. So obviously, you're a rock star at raising money and getting clients. 2 very, very good talents to have in today's market. Can you give anybody advice on they don't have their first investor, they don't have their first client? How do you get in the mindset to go ask for that first $1 million, or how do you get through the gatekeepers at a company like Lockheed Martin? Like what are some of the tips or tricks or mindsets that you use to really get through that?
So I will tell you, I am in no way a rock star at doing this. I am probably a rookie roadie. It is very hard to do. You just have to have the passion. It helps when you have the technology that is proven and you can show it. I'll tell you, one of the challenges we actually have is that imagine Excel didn't exist today, and all of a sudden you create Excel. Excel's built for everything.
Right.
It's hard to market something to everything. We sort of have that problem, but we've found some markets that have these types of problems that we can address, and those are primarily transportation, logistics, oil and gas, and the Department of Defense. So you have to find. So the other thing, you have to find what is essentially the low-hanging fruit, right? You need to find. It may not be your best market. For instance, I think our best market will be fintech. I think there's a lot more money to be made there because they know their costs. However, we can't break that seal. But transportation, logistics people, and oil and gas people, the DoD have the problems that are ready to pick, and they're willing to give it a try. And so you've got to find that. You got to find where you can best break the seal and exploit that the best that you can, and then try to go for greater ground cover and expand your market verticals and what have you.
Awesome. So if you have a good product, it's finding the right group of people to solve their problem for, or the right problem. Is it the right group or the right problem to solve?
Well, you need the right problem, but you have to find the right person. And typically, for us, even though it's a very scientific solution, we don't go in through the scientific people. They don't have the decision-making capability. What you have to do is go higher. The higher you can go, the better. And to hit a business person that appreciates the implications of it, where the scientists may appreciate the fact that you can give them a bigger hammer and they can be a bigger hero, but but they can't do it unless somebody else approves it. So you also need to go in as high as you can go in. But you have to use your network to get to people that you want to talk to. And also you have to get out there. And for this company, conferences and trade shows have been our best ability to build awareness of what we do. And so it was tough actually in 2020 and 2021. There were no in-person conferences. Everything was remote, and the remote ones, you just don't have people who have to wander by your booth.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I found when I'm selling, specifically on B2B, business to business sales, getting to the CFO or CEO and convincing them that my product will save you money is the fastest way to get there. If you're dealing with if you're selling technology business to business, it's really hard talking to the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer first, right? Because a whole ton of different issues, right? They've got their systems, they've got everything's in place, and they don't want to be disrupted, right? But the CFO and the CEO say, hey, I can save you 20, 30, 40% on X, Y, or Z. And computing, unfortunately, computing is a profit center to most businesses today, but a lot of CFOs look at it as a cost center, right? And like, oh, that's just technology. It costs us money. That's not our product. Unless technology is your product, they look at it as a cost, which is still bizarre to me. I don't understand how that's the mindset still in a lot of businesses across the globe. But I definitely I'm running into that still regularly, that technology is just a cost center and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
right?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. But and you're absolutely right. The higher you can go, if you can get into the CEO, it's interesting because a CEO will kind of pass something down and say, I'm not telling you to do this, but I would like you to look at it. Well, if you report to the CEO or up through those ranks and you hear that, you're going to think, I want to make my CEO happy. And you're looking for ways to make it succeed versus looking at ways to say, gee, ma'am, what you thought was a good idea, it's really a piece of shit, right? And you don't want to do that. And so you're going to try to say, you are the most brilliant CEO I've ever worked for, and I'm glad you brought this to me. This is going to be wonderful for our company, and I'm here for you.
Right. Yeah, and that's a slippery slope too, right? If the CEO gives you something as the VP or director, you want to vet the heck out of whatever you're going to do. You want to make sure that if you're in this position, you want to make sure that you're not giving all the hurdles. You're giving all the reasons why it would work. And if there are hurdles, hey, these are the hurdles that we might have with it that we might have to overcome going in. And I've made this mistake. Like, no, there's no way this is going to work. And I didn't have a good, input on why it wouldn't work, or, if we did come across the hurdle, how would we overcome that hurdle?
Yep.
Right. And that's entrepreneurs and CEOs, CFO or CEOs more than CFOs want to know how we're going to make this work, right? If we're going to go down this path, will it work, and how do we make it work, and how do we make it really successful?
Yep,
that to me is the best mindset that you can go into when you're talking with investors, CEOs. Until you hit CFO, then it's just about the money, nothing else. That's all he cares about. So if you can save him money, that's the easiest B2B sale that I've ever had, is convince the CFO that he will save money by using your product or service. You should be in the ballpark with them. So, awesome. Yep. John, I've had a blast talking tech with you today and a little bit of business. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we get out of here today?
No, I guess I just, if people are thinking about startup, actually, I guess there's one thing. So if you're thinking about joining a startup, you want to be an employee. I'll tell you one thing that I say to every person that I hire at any one of my companies. I tell them that I guarantee that if you come to work for this company, you will be richer for it. Maybe not monetarily, because it may not succeed. However, in a startup, you get exposed because it's so small. You get exposed to everything that's going on, and you're going to learn a lot. You may learn that I never, ever want to do a startup again. Well, that's a valuable lesson.
Yes.
But you can also learn that, hey, I understand why this one failed. I won't do that again. I see this other opportunity. I'm going to go over there and see if we can't make this one work.
Awesome. Yep, absolutely. You learn so much with the small groups, and you're doing everything, right? You're doing the accounting, the HR, the payroll, the research and development, everything across the board. It's challenging, but wildly rewarding at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Especially when you pull something off.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yes. Yes.
makes it all that much better. All right, John, thank you so much for your time today. We very much appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
That's it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, the number is 314-370-2871. All you have to do to join that text line is send me any